The glowing crystal chandelier cast a soft light over our mahogany dining table. I stared at the red velvet cake sitting between us. 12 white candles flickered silently, representing 12 long years of marriage. Julian didn't even look up from his glowing smartphone screen. His thumb swiped rapidly across the glass while his gold watch caught the overhead light. "Julian," I said softly, resting my hands on the white linen tablecloth. "Are you going to blow out the candles with me?" "I don't have time for this childish nonsense, Clara," Julian replied, his voice cold and clipped. He tossed his phone onto the table with a loud clatter. "We need to talk." "It's our anniversary," I reminded him, my heart heavy with a strange dark dread. "Can't whatever it is wait until tomorrow?" "No, it can't," Julian said, leaning back in his leather chair. He crossed his arms, looking down his nose at me as if I were an employee begging for an extension. "I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I stared at him, my breath catching in my throat. "A divorce? Julian, where is this coming from?" "It's coming from reality, Clara," he spat out, taking a sip from his wine glass. "Look at yourself. You've become boring, predictable, and utterly useless to me. You sit in this house all day doing nothing while I run a multi-million-dollar logistics firm. I sacrificed my entire legal career to build your brand," I shouted, standing up from my chair. "I organized your corporate events. I introduced you to every high-end investor in Los Angeles. I gave 12 years of my life to you." Julian let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Please, Claire, don't flatter yourself. You survived on my hard work and my success. I grew up and you stayed stagnant. Is there someone else?" I asked, my voice cracking despite my best efforts to stay strong. "Tell me the truth, Julian." A smug, proud smirk spread across his face. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Her name is Tiffany. She's 24, brilliant, full of life, and my personal assistant. She actually respects my ambition instead of dragging me down with boring routines." 24. I whispered, a cold wave of shock washing over my body. "She's practically a child, Julian. You're 40 years old. She makes me feel alive." Julian snapped, slamming his palm onto the table. "And unlike you, she knows how to look good on my arm at corporate galas. She doesn't spend her days wearing plain clothes and reading old family contract files." I stared at the man I had loved for over a decade. His eyes held no warmth, no guilt, and no regret. 12 years of devotion, ruined for a 24-year-old assistant who liked his black credit cards. "What about our home?" I asked quietly, keeping my face as calm as marble. "What about everything we built?" "This $20 million mansion belongs to a real executive," Julian said coldly, waving his hand toward the high ceilings. "I want you packed and out of here by the end of the week. I'm bringing Tiffany here on Friday night. I've already hired moving trucks to clear your plain furniture out of the guest rooms." "You're kicking me out of my own home?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "It's my home, Clara," Julian sneered, tapping his chest. "I made the money. I paid the bills. I signed the corporate deals. You just lived here under my shadow. You have 7 days to find a tiny apartment downtown. Don't make this messy, or I won't give you a single penny in spousal support." I looked at him, feeling a sudden, strange shift inside my chest. The agonizing heartbreak melted away, replaced instantly by an icy, calculated focus. Julian was so blinded by his own sudden arrogance that he had forgotten a critical detail. He had forgotten who owned the ground beneath his feet. 10 years ago, when his first logistics company went broke, my late father had stepped in. My father had bought this estate and established the overarching business lines of credit through our family legal entity, Sterling Heritage Holdings. Everything, the land title, the house deed, the primary bank lines, and the elite black credit cards in Julian's leather wallet, was registered exclusively under my maiden name's legal structure. Julian had only been granted authorized user status under my primary account. He genuinely believed he owned the empire. He had bought into his own delusion. "I see," I said softly, taking a deep breath and sitting back down in my chair. "You've completely made up your mind, then?" 100%, Julian declared, picking up his phone again with a triumphant grin. "Tiffany and I are going out to celebrate tonight. Don't wait up for me. And make sure you've started packing those boxes tomorrow morning." "Are you taking the MasterCard?" I asked, my voice completely neutral. "Of course I am," Julian scoffed, sliding his thick platinum black card into his suit pocket. "I'm taking Tiffany to Lauberge downtown. She deserves the best." "Have a wonderful evening, Julian," I said, a faint, subtle smile touching my lips. "Whatever," Julian muttered, standing up and brushing off his suit jacket. Try not to cry too much over the cake, Clara. It's embarrassing. He turned on his heel and strode out of the dining room, his heavy leather shoes echoing against the marble floors until the front door slammed shut. I sat alone in the quiet room. The candles on our anniversary cake flickered one last time before dying out, leaving thin wisps of smoke in the air. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my private phone, and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Arthur, I said when the line connected. It's Clara. I need you to pull up my father's original trust files tonight. Clara? Arthur Sterling's sharp, experienced voice answered instantly. Is everything all right? Julian just asked for a divorce, I said, looking at the empty doorway. And he thinks he owns my house. I'll have the legal files on your desk in an hour, Arthur replied calmly. Let's put him in his place. No, I smiled, blowing out the last trailing wisp of candle smoke. Let him make his biggest mistake first. Julian spent the next morning throwing his expensive designer suits into 3 massive leather suitcases. I stood silently in the hallway, watching him zip up the final bag with a triumphant smirk on his face. I'm staying at the luxury penthouse on Wilshire until our divorce settles, Julian announced, pulling his suit jacket over his broad shoulders. Tiffany thinks the view of Beverly Hills is much better there anyway. I hope you both enjoy the view, I said, keeping my voice completely even. Don't sound so bitter, Clara, he sneered, grabbing his suitcase handles. I left a stack of moving boxes in the garage for you. Be out of my house by Friday afternoon, or I'll have my company security team throw your stuff onto the street. I understand, Julian, I replied softly. You've made your position very clear. Good, he scoffed, walking past me toward the grand front entrance. At least you aren't making a pathetic scene. The moment his sports car roared down the long driveway, I turned around and walked straight into my late father's private study. I sat behind the heavy mahogany desk, picked up the landline phone and called Arthur Sterling. He just left for his penthouse, I said the second Arthur picked up the line. I have all your family trust records laid out across my desk right now, Clara, Arthur said, his sharp, experienced voice filled with authority. I reviewed your prenuptial agreement alongside the corporate collateral filings from 10 years ago. What did you find, Arthur? I asked, leaning forward on the desk. Does he have any legal standing over this estate? 0, Arthur stated firmly. Your father, lowercase s Sterling Heritage Holdings, owns the deed to the Beverly Hills mansion outright. Julian's name isn't on a single property title. But that isn't even the biggest mistake he made. What do you mean? Julian's logistics firm, Vance Global, operates entirely on a $20 million revolving line of credit, Arthur explained carefully. To get that loan 10 years ago, your father signed a corporate guarantee backed directly by your family's estate collateral. Julian is merely an authorized signer on the business credit accounts. A cold, satisfied smile spread across my face. So without my family trust's backing, his corporate credit doesn't exist? It collapses instantly, Arthur confirmed. Furthermore, every elite black card in his wallet is an authorized user card tied directly to your primary estate account. He has been spending your family's money to parade his new assistant around town. He bought her a $50,000 diamond bracelet in Beverly Hills 2 hours ago, I said, checking the bank alert notifications on my phone. The transaction alert just hit my email. Do you want me to freeze the cards right now, Clara? Arthur asked. I can file an emergency injunction with the bank within 5 minutes. No, I replied, taking a slow, deep breath. Not yet. Let him feel completely invincible for 48 hours. Let him take her to the most expensive places in Los Angeles. Let him build his confidence up as high as possible. What is your plan? Arthur asked, a subtle chuckle echoing through the line. You always inherited your father's patience. I want to sell the mansion first, I said clearly. I want this house off my hands before he even realizes he's homeless. I already contacted Victoria Cross at Cross Luxury Real Estate, Arthur noted. She has an international billionaire client looking for a fully furnished Beverly Hills estate. He offered $22 million in cash this morning, ready to close in 3 days. Bring Victoria over to the house right now, I said. I'll sign the sale agreement before noon. Are you sure about this, Clara? Arthur asked softly, his tone turning gentle. You lived in that house for 12 years. You built a life there with him. I built a life with a man who didn't exist, Arthur, I said, looking around the quiet, empty study. Julian proved last night that he only cared about the wealth my family provided. I'm not going to throw a temper tantrum or scream at him in public. I'm just going to take back what belongs to me. I'll be at your house in 20 minutes with the listing contracts, Arthur said proudly. Victoria will have the closing documents ready by tomorrow morning. An hour later, I sat across from Victoria Cross in the living room. Victoria was a sharp, stunning woman dressed in an immaculate white suit, tapping her gold pen against a leather folder. "This is an incredible property, Clara," Victoria said, sliding the thick contract across the glass table toward me. "My buyer signed the cash waiver already. He doesn't even want an inspection. Once you sign this, the title transfers immediately, and the new owner takes possession on Thursday morning. That gives Julian exactly 48 hours of pure financial freedom," I said, uncapping my pen. "He has no idea, does he?" Victoria asked, raising an eyebrow with a knowing smirk. "He thinks I'm currently packing my clothes into cardboard boxes in the garage," I replied, signing my name neatly on the bottom line of the real estate contract. "He is in for a very rude awakening," Arthur added, taking the signed contract from Victoria and securing it inside his briefcase. "I will schedule the credit freeze and collateral revocation for tomorrow night at precisely 8 o'clock. "Perfect," I said, standing up and shaking Victoria's hand. "Make sure the moving crew clears out his remaining personal items and stacks them neatly on the driveway curb on Thursday morning." "It will be handled with absolute precision," Victoria promised. I walked Arthur and Victoria to the front door. As I watched their cars pull away down the long driveway, my phone chimed again with another transaction alert from a high-end designer boutique on Rodeo Drive. Julian had just spent another $15,000 on Tiffany's wardrobe. I looked at the glowing screen and smiled softly to myself. "Enjoy my money while you still can, Julian. The clock is ticking." I sat on my quiet patio in Malibu, sipping warm tea while tracking my tablet screen. At 8 o'clock sharp, Arthur Sterling executed the primary bank order. With a single digital stroke, every credit card, joint line and corporate guarantee attached to Sterling Heritage Holdings was permanently frozen. At that exact moment, across town at Lauberge, Julian was sitting at a prime center table surrounded by his wealthy business associates. I picked up my phone and called Detective Frank Miller, who was parked right outside the venue monitoring Julian's movements. "Is he still inside, Frank?" I asked into the speaker. "Oh, he's inside, Clara," Frank laughed softly over the line. "He's been ordering $500 bottles of wine all night, trying to show off for his young girlfriend and those venture capitalists. The card freeze just went live 5 seconds ago," I informed him quietly. "This is going to be spectacular," Frank chuckled. "Hold on," the waiter just brought the leather bill tray to his table. Inside the grand dining room, Julian picked up the leather folder without even looking at the total cost. He pulled the thick titanium black card from his jacket pocket and slapped it onto the silver tray with a loud, pompous tap. "Put it all on this," Julian announced loudly, leaning back and wrapping his arm around Tiffany's bare shoulders. "And bring us 2 more glasses of your finest cognac, please." "Right away, Mr. Vance." The waiter bowed politely, taking the card to the manager's terminal nearby. Tiffany giggled, running her manicured fingers along a heavy gold bracelet Julian had bought her earlier that afternoon. "You're so incredible, Julian. Everyone in this restaurant is staring at us." "Get used to it, baby," Julian boasted, puffing out his chest toward his corporate associates across the table. "When you're at the top of the logistics industry, you live like royalty." A moment later, the waiter returned, looking visibly uncomfortable. He leaned down toward Julian's ear, whispering softly, "Sir, I'm very sorry, but the black card was declined." Julian's smug smirk instantly froze. "What? That's impossible. Swipe it again." "I ran it 3 times through 2 different terminals, Mr. Vance," the waiter explained calmly. "The system returned a hard code refusal. Account suspended by primary owner." "Suspended?" Julian yelled, his loud voice causing several neighboring tables to turn and look. "Do you have any idea who I am? That card has a $500,000 monthly limit." "I'm just reading the screen, sir," the waiter replied, keeping his voice quiet. "The bill comes to $12,400. "Julian, what is going on?" Tiffany whined loudly, her sweet tone dropping into an irritated glare. "You said we were VIPs here. This is super embarrassing." "Shut up for a second, Tiffany," Julian snapped, reaching into his leather wallet with trembling hands. "It's just a stupid bank glitch. Here, use my corporate platinum card." The waiter took the second card, walked over to the register and swiped it. A sharp, red warning chime echoed from the device. "Sir, this card is also declined," the waiter called out, walking back to the table with an increasingly cold demeanor. Panic flared in Julian's eyes. Sweat began to bead along his hairline. He pulled out 3 more credit cards from his wallet, throwing them onto the table. Try all of them. Every single one. The waiter ran each card through the machine. Declined. 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 Julian. Tiffany screamed, standing up from her leather chair so fast her wine glass tipped over, spilling red liquid across the white cloth. Are you serious right now? You brought me to a luxury restaurant and you can't even pay the bill? Tiffany, calm down. Julian begged, his face flushing bright red as his business associates looked on in complete horror. It's a technical error. Clara must have messed up the online banking portal. I don't care about your boring wife's portal. Tiffany shrieked, her face contorting in pure rage in front of the entire crowded room. You swore you were a multimillionaire. You said you owned everything. You're completely broke. I am not broke. Julian shouted back, grabbing his smartphone to dial my number. My tablet screen lit up with his caller ID. I tapped the green button and placed the phone to my ear. Clara. Julian screamed into the receiver, his voice cracking with absolute desperation. What the hell did you do to my credit cards? Hello, Julian, I answered, my tone as smooth as silk. How is your anniversary dinner with Tiffany going? Fix this right now, he demanded hysterically, ignoring the gasps from the patrons around his table. I'm standing at Lauberge in front of my business partners. My black card was declined. Unlock the line of credit immediately. I'm afraid I can't do that, Julian, I said calmly. You see, those cards belong to Sterling Heritage Holdings, my father's trust. And since you made it very clear that I am useless and off your team, I revoked your authorized user status. You can't do that. Julian gasped, his voice turning pale with horror as the reality hit him. My entire business line of credit is tied to those accounts. My company can't operate without them. Then I suggest you find another way to pay your $12,000 dinner bill, Julian, I said softly. Clara, wait. Please, he begged, his pompous attitude completely shattering into pathetic fear. Don't do this to me. Goodbye, Julian, I said, hanging up the phone before he could speak another word. On the restaurant floor, Julian stared at his dead phone screen in absolute shock. Tiffany grabbed her designer handbag off the table, spat on the floor near his shoes, and stormed out the front doors, leaving Julian standing alone under the bright chandelier, utterly disgraced, humiliated, and broke. The morning sun was rising over Beverly Hills as Julian's luxury sports car screeched to a halt in front of the grand iron security gates of our estate. He stepped out of the vehicle, his tie undone, eyes bloodshot, and his expensive suit wrinkled from a sleepless night. Tiffany scrambled out of the passenger side right behind him, her hands on her hips, her voice dripping with venom. You promised me we were staying at your $20 million estate. Tiffany yelled, pointing an accusing finger at his face. If this is another lie, Julian, I swear I'm taking the next flight back to Miami. It's not a lie, Tiffany. Julian snapped back, waving his arms wildly as he marched toward the keycard scanner. Clara is just playing stupid games because her feelings are hurt. I am going to kick her out of my house right now, and you can have the master bedroom. He slammed his personal access card against the digital sensor. A harsh red light flashed on the panel, followed by a loud, buzzing denial tone. What? Julian screamed, hitting the scanner with his fist. Open the gate. Instead of the gate swinging open, a sleek white SUV pulled up on the other side of the iron bars. Victoria Cross stepped out of the vehicle, dressed in an immaculate, sharply tailored white suit. 2 tall, burly armed security guards followed her, standing firmly behind the gate. Can I help you with something, sir? Victoria asked, her voice cool, professional, and entirely unbothered by his rage. Who the hell are you? Julian demanded, pressing his face against the iron bars. Where is Clara? Tell her to open my gate right now before I call the police. Mrs. Vance is no longer on the premises, Victoria replied calmly, pulling a clipboard from under her arm. And as for this property, you no longer have authorization to enter. No authorization? Julian laughed hysterically, turning to glare at Tiffany, who was glaring right back at him. This is my house. I live here. I paid for this place. Actually, Mr. Vance, you didn't, Victoria said smoothly. She motioned to one of the security guards, who tapped a button on his remote to slide the iron gate open just enough for Victoria to step through. My name is Victoria Cross, representing Cross Luxury Real Estate. I am here to inform you that this estate was officially sold 2 hours ago in an all-cash transaction for $18 million. Julian froze, his jaw dropping so low it looked as if it might hit the pavement. Sold? You can't sell my house. That's illegal. I'll sue you, I'll sue Clara, and I'll sue your entire firm. You can attempt to sue whoever you like, Mr. Vance, Victoria replied, handing him a thick, stapled document through the gap in the gate. However, if you look at the title deed attached right there, you will see that Sterling Heritage Holdings, a private trust managed exclusively by Clara Vance, has owned this land and property outright for 12 years. Your name appears nowhere on the legal title. Julian snatched the paper from her hands, his eyes frantically scanning the dark text. Sweat began pouring down his forehead as his face turned entirely pale. No, this is a mistake. My father-in-law promised me this house. Your father-in-law protected his daughter's inheritance, Victoria corrected him cold and fast. The new buyer took official possession of the property at 6 o'clock this morning. You are currently trespassing on private corporate land. Where are my things? Julian shouted, throwing the paper onto the hood of his sports car. My clothes, my watches, my artwork. Victoria gestured toward the far curb outside the estate property line. Stacked neatly along the concrete were 20 plain cardboard boxes, topped with 2 large trash bags containing his remaining suits. Your personal belongings have been carefully packed and removed from the premises, Victoria stated flatly. We gave you the courtesy of leaving them on the curb. If they are not cleared away within 2 hours, city sanitation will haul them to the local dump. You put my designer suits in trash bags? Julian roared, taking a threatening step forward. Instantly, the 2 armed security guards stepped into his path, placing their hands squarely on their holsters. I suggest you step back, Mr. Vance, the head guard warned, his voice deep and menacing. You have 60 seconds to load your boxes and leave this driveway, or we will have you arrested for criminal trespass and felony harassment. Julian. Tiffany shrieked from behind him, looking at the cardboard boxes in utter disgust. Are you serious right now? Your stuff is sitting on the street in trash bags? You don't own this house? You don't own anything. Tiffany, please. Just help me load the car. Julian begged, turning toward her with desperate, bloodshot eyes. We can go back to the penthouse. We can figure this out. Figure what out? Tiffany screamed, stepping backward toward the passenger door. Your cards were declined last night, your house was sold out from under you, and you're getting thrown out by security. You're a fake. You're completely broke. I am not broke. Julian cried, his voice breaking in total humiliation as Victoria watched him with a cold, disgusted expression. I run a logistics empire. You don't even own a house. Tiffany spat, getting into the car and slamming the door shut. Drive me to the airport right now, you pathetic loser. Julian stood alone on the pavement, looking at the armed guards, the locked gates, and the endless stack of cardboard boxes holding his ruined life. He realized, with crushing absolute certainty, that he had lost everything. I sat in the quiet conference room of Sterling Heritage Holdings, watching rain droplets slide down the glass window. Arthur Sterling sat across from me sipping black coffee, while Detective Frank Miller unbuttoned his trench coat and placed a thick manila folder on the table. It's over for Vance Global, Clara, Frank said, leaning his heavy hands against the wood. Without your trust's $20 million collateral backing his firm, the bank pulled the plug this morning. Every single one of his corporate accounts is frozen. Did the loan officers file for immediate default? Arthur asked, adjusting his spectacles. Not just default, Frank replied with a cold laugh. They called in the entire balance. When Julian couldn't produce the liquid assets to cover the margin call, the board stripped him of his CEO title. He doesn't even have access to his corner office anymore. What about the forensic financial audit? I asked, looking up from my coffee cup. Did you find out where the operational funds were disappearing to? Frank opened the manila folder, sliding a stack of bank statements and glossy surveillance photographs across the table toward me. Julian wasn't just arrogant, Clara, Frank said, pointing at a line item on the statement. He was desperate and stupid. Over the past 6 months, he embezzled nearly $800,000 directly from his clients' escrow accounts to buy Tiffany luxury watches, diamond necklaces, and lease that penthouse on Wilshire. Embezzlement from corporate escrow? Arthur shook his head in absolute disbelief. That isn't just a civil lawsuit, Frank. That is a federal felony. The district attorney's office received the official fraud report 3 hours ago, Frank confirmed, leaning back in his chair. They're preparing an arrest warrant as we speak. Julian is facing 5 to 10 years in state prison. Meanwhile, across town in the cramped living room of the Wilshire penthouse, chaos was breaking out. Julian burst through the front door, his eyes wild with terror, holding a legal notice he had just received from the bank's process server. "Tiffany!" Julian screamed, running into the master bedroom. "Pack your bags right now. We have to leave Los Angeles before the police show up at the door." Tiffany was standing near the walk-in closet, but she wasn't packing for an escape together. She was stuffing her high-end designer handbags and fur coats into 4 massive luggage cases. "What are you doing?" Julian gasped, rushing over to grab her wrist. "Put those down. We need to take my sports car and drive south across the border right now." Tiffany pulled her arm back with sharp disgust, shoving him away hard. "Don't touch me, you pathetic fraud." "Tiffany, baby, listen to me," Julian begged, his hands trembling violently as sweat dripped down his nose. "It's just a temporary financial delay. I have offshore contacts. Once we get to Mexico, I can rebuild everything. I love you." "You love me?" Tiffany laughed hysterically, zipping up her final diamond-encrusted suitcase with a loud snap. "You lied to me about everything, Julian. You told me you were a billionaire CEO who owned a Beverly Hills estate. You don't own anything. You're just a broke crook who stole money to buy me jewelry that the government is about to confiscate." "I did it all for you," Julian cried out, dropping to his knees on the bedroom floor, tears streaming down his flushed face. "I gave up my 12-year marriage for you. I threw Clara away because I wanted to give you the world." "Then you're even dumber than I thought," Tiffany spat, rolling her heavy suitcases toward the bedroom door. "Clara was the only reason you ever looked like a real man. Without her family's money backing you up, you're absolutely nothing." "Where are you going?" Julian sobbed, crawling after her across the plush carpet. "Who is going to take care of you?" "Marcus," Tiffany smiled coldly, looking down her nose at him with pure contempt. "The real venture capitalist you tried to impress at Lauber's the night your fake black cards got declined. He actually has his own money, Julian. He sent his private driver to pick me up downstairs 5 minutes ago. No. You can't leave me like this." Julian screamed, clutching at the hem of her designer skirt. "I ruined my entire life for you." "You ruined your life because you're greedy and arrogant," Tiffany sneered, kicking his hands away from her dress with her sharp high heel. "Lose my number, Julian. The police are probably waiting in the lobby anyway." She slammed the heavy penthouse door behind her, the sharp click of the lock echoing through the empty, silent apartment. Julian lay on the cold floor, staring at the ceiling as the reality of his downfall crushed him completely. There was no wealth, no logistics empire, no penthouse and no young mistress. Every single luxury he had ever enjoyed, the respect, the clothes, the cars, the house, the social status, had been provided entirely by the quiet, devoted woman he had called useless and boring. He had traded 12 years of unconditional love and ultimate security for a cheap illusion that evaporated the moment the money dried up. Outside on the street below, the wail of police sirens began to echo through the buildings, coming closer and closer to his building. Julian closed his eyes, buried his face in his hands, and wept bitterly in the empty room, realizing that his ruin was entirely his own doing. 6 months after the collapse of Vance Global, the crisp ocean breeze swept past my broad balcony in Malibu. I sat comfortably behind a sleek glass executive desk inside my new beachfront headquarters, overseeing the expansion of Sterling Heritage Capital. The intercom on my telephone desk buzzed softly. "Clara?" My receptionist's voice echoed through the speaker. "There is a man downstairs in the main lobby named Julian Vance. He doesn't have an appointment, but he is desperately begging to see you for just 2 minutes." I paused, looking out at the turquoise waves rolling onto the sand. "Has he been cleared by building security?" "Yes, ma'am." The guard searched him. "He's harmless, but he looks very distressed." "Send him up," I said softly, releasing the button. 2 minutes later, my office door creaked open slowly. I barely recognized the man who stepped inside. Julian looked completely broken. The sharp, arrogant CEO who used to strut around in $3,000 tailored suits was gone. In his place stood a pale, haggard man wearing a faded brown jacket and scuffed shoes. His hair was messy, dark circles hollowed his eyes, and his hands trembled violently as he clutched a cheap paper envelope. "Clara," Julian whispered, his voice cracking instantly with heavy emotion. "Hello, Julian," I said, staying seated behind my desk, keeping my hands resting calmly on the cool glass. "Take a seat." He didn't sit. Instead, he took 3 rushed steps toward my desk, tears flooding his bloodshot eyes. "Clara, please. I don't even know where to begin." "You don't have to begin anywhere, Julian," I said, my tone completely level. "How did your bail hearing go last week?" The judge granted me conditional probation because I surrendered all the corporate assets, Julian sobbed, dropping his head into his trembling hands. I lost the sports car. The bank seized the Wilshire penthouse. I'm living in a tiny studio apartment near the bus depot downtown, working 12 hours a day at a car wash just to pay off my legal fees. I heard, I replied gently. Actions have consequences. I was so stupid, Clara. Julian cried out, taking another step forward, dropping to his knees right in front of my desk just as he had done in the penthouse. Tiffany took everything. The moment the bank froze those cards, she laughed in my face and ran off with Marcus. She never loved me. She only wanted the money. I told you she was using you, Julian, I reminded him quietly. You didn't want to listen. I know, he wailed, beating his fist weakly against his knee. I let my foolish pride ruin the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I spent 12 years with a brilliant, loyal, beautiful woman who built my entire world, and I threw you away for cheap attention. I looked down at him kneeling on the floor. 6 months ago, his betrayal had ripped my heart into pieces. I had cried until my eyes were raw. But now, as I stared into his tear-filled face, I felt a profound sense of peace. There was no burning anger left, no desire for vengeance, and no lingering heartbreak. There was only absolute, total indifference. Get up off the floor, Julian, I said softly. It's embarrassing. Julian wiped his wet face with his sleeve and stood up slowly, looking at me with desperate, hopeful eyes. Clara, please. I'm begging you for a second chance. I don't care about the wealth, the mansions, or the black cards. I just want my wife back. We can start over in a small house. I'll work every single day to earn your trust again. Julian, look at me, I said, meeting his gaze directly. He leaned forward, searching my eyes for a single spark of the devoted woman he used to command. The Clara who spent 12 years putting her life on hold for you doesn't exist anymore, I told him, every word dripping with calm certainty. You killed her the night you sat across from me at our anniversary dinner and told me I was useless, boring, and easy to replace. I didn't mean it, he pleaded hysterically. I was blind. No, you meant every word, I corrected him smoothly. You only regret it now because your cheap status dissolved, your young mistress abandoned you, and you realized you couldn't survive without my family's umbrella. Clara, please don't do this, he sobbed, tears dripping onto his worn jacket collar. I have nothing left. You have your life, Julian, I said, reaching into my small leather wallet on the desk. I pulled out a single crisp $1 bill and slid it across the glass toward him. Julian stared at the paper bill in utter confusion. What is this? That is for your bus fare back to your studio apartment downtown, I said, leaning back in my leather chair. You traded 12 years of unyielding devotion, loyalty, and protection for a few weeks of cheap status. You bought your lesson. Now you have to live with the purchase. Julian stared at the dollar bill on the desk, his body shaking violently as the absolute finality of my words settled over him. He realized there were no more negotiations, no more second chances, and no way back into my world. Goodbye, Julian, I said, looking back at my computer screen. With trembling fingers, Julian picked up the single dollar bill from the glass. He didn't say another word. He turned around, his head bowed low, and shuffled out of my office, crying silently as the door clicked softly behind him. I took a deep, clean breath of the crisp sea air flowing through the balcony doors. My past was completely paid in full, my family's legacy was secure, and my future was finally my own.